I would now like to announce panel 2. This is the first youth panel for the conference program, and I'm very excited to see these speakers here today. First, I'd like to introduce our 2 moderators, Ms. Gretchen Worth and Ms. Fatia Grace Yongsangwon Chai. Ms. Gretchen is an advisor for the Southeast Asian Cultural Heritage Alliance and director of the Susan Christofferson Center for Community Planning, which supports a more equitable and climate-resilient built environment. Gretchen has worked in North and Southeast Asia for more than 25 years as a founder and CEO of Asia Media Group, and she is an active board member of Restoration Works International, which helps communities around the world to restore, rehabilitate, and reimagine their cultural heritage sites. Ms. Grace is a member of the Youth Committee for the Southeast Asian Cultural Heritage Alliance and a current senior at the Thai Chinese International School here in Bangkok. In 2021, Grace was a Thai delegate to the UN's Youth for Climate Conference in Milan, where she advocated for youth empowerment in the fight against climate change on the international stage. Please welcome our 2 moderators. I would then like to announce the first group of speakers for this second panel, Ms. Chanraksmey Seng, Mr. Ne Myo Htet, Ms. Supanit Pangmala, and Ms. Wijaya Amasara. Please join me in welcoming them. And now I will turn it over to our moderators.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. We're really thrilled to kick off our youth panel portion of the SEACHA Culture Wisdom for Climate Action Conference. And just to say a few words before we introduce our first group of panelists. Since the early days of SEACHA, it's been really important that we incorporate youth and a younger generation into the work that we're doing at SEACHA. And so we really, from the beginning, have tried to provide opportunities and ways to incorporate the voices, the work of a younger generation throughout ASEAN. So we've been doing that regularly through our monthly Cha Time series. If you have not joined us for a Cha Time, please do. And now this is another important step in bringing youth voices to be heard in how cultural wisdom can impact climate action. Since we have 16 youth speakers who first came together in August in person in Bangkok to talk about the themes of the conference, and then they broke into 4 different groups, and they've been working really hard remotely over the past months to prepare the presentations that you're going to hear today. Before we start, we also would really like to thank the advisors to this group, Kun Nina and Kun Aim, who have worked also very, very hard and really closely with our youth teams to help them shape and direct and articulate their presentations and message at the conference. So with that, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell you just briefly a little about themselves, and then Wijaya is going to kick us off. Do you want to start?
Hello, Minglawa everyone. I'm so glad to see all the honorable guests at there's such kind of conference, cultural wisdom for the climate action, the Southeast Asia contribution. I'm Htet as a youth representative from the Myanmar and also an architecture students.
Hello, Sabaidi from Laos. My name is Supanit Pangmala. I'm now an environmental worker and environmental inspector assistant in a hydropower plant company in Laos PR. So glad to meet you today.
Good evening, our honor audience, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chanraksmey. I come from Cambodia, and recently I am an architect who are working with consultancy, construction and design, and based in capital in Phnom Penh. Thank you, and nice to be here today. Thank you.
Right.
That's
okay, nice.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Widya. I'm a program coordinator from the Indonesian Heritage Trust, and today I was entrusted by my group to present to you the information and the thoughts that we have gathered and condensed together in this panel. Right. And I can start. I can start. Okay. Right. Okay. The slides don't change for some reason. Oh, all right. Okay, right. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are from Group 1 of SEACHA Youth Representatives, and today we will bring to you our perspective about ethics, wellness, and empowerment reflected in traditional culture towards sustainable way of living. And we can skip on this one, we already did that. And the outline of our talk will be first, we will, just like how we introduced ourselves earlier, we will also give you a brief introduction of our regions, our differences, our similarities, and also how our similar climate, which affected our habits, which in turn will develop into our culture. And after that, we will also give a view towards two of our most environmentally damaging industries, that is buildings and textiles. And we will also look at real-life case studies of these two. And after that, in the end, we will have a message, so stay tuned. Right, so sustainable living for the world. Now, all four of us are just like this region, Southeast Asia. We share a lot of differences, but also without doubt, a lot of similarities too. And there are also a lot of examples of Southeast Asia culture that we shared related to sustainability in our daily life. Like for example, just last night, I learned of something that the ancestor of Kunpek from Nailert Park Heritage Home, her ancestor, she created a whole new dish to avoid a delicious broth going to waste. And also, I thought that most of us in our home, we have mortar and pestle in our kitchen, right? Using mortar and pestle instead of food processor, we not only cut back on electricity, but also while we cook, we also move our body and thus make us more healthy. And also in Indonesia, there is a community that utilized invasive water plants called enceng gondok and made them into beautiful handicrafts. So in that one fell swoop, they clean the river from the invasive species, and they also get to give work opportunities and chances for local people to gain skills on handicrafts. And they also get to make a creative products to sell and introduce to outside of their communities. So if we notice, some of these long-standing habits are actually beneficial, not just for us, not just to make us more fulfilled or wealthy, but also for our wellness and health, and not just for humans too, but also for the environment, which is the big theme today. So what I described just now was like maybe the environmentally conscious, the idealized version, sustainable way of living that we can potentially achieve as Southeast Asian. But what about the reality? Now, as I mentioned earlier, we will take a deeper look at this through two of the most environmentally damaging industries, and we will start with building. So the reality is now that due to development of urbanization, especially after World War II, there are lots of construction industries and migration towards urban areas has been going on. And at that time, we are still recovering from war, and everyone thought that it was a good perspective that we are developing as a society. But no one predicted the upcoming disaster of something that grows with minimal or even without control. That is declining air quality, climate change, and then uncontrollable population growth, traffic, construction development, noise pollution that leads to negative effects. especially in the health of humans, the health of our mental, and also the health of the nature. And I so happened to witness a direct result of this just a week ago. So in my hometown, Semarang, we have had quite an extreme weather since New Year. And in a housing complex near my place, just 2 kilometers away from my home, we had a massive flood. We are talking 2.5 meters of flood that reaches the roof, so people have to climb all the way to the roof to stay dry. But the scary thing is, it's not even in the lowlands. It was located quite high on the hills. So I once joked around that if my place, my part of town were to be flooded, then it's probably then the city center will probably become part of the Java Sea. So I joke like that, but turns out today it came true that part of town was flooded. So I was really shocked. Why? How? And then I found out that the housing complex, it was built very close to the riverbank, where no buildings are supposed to be built, because there are local wisdom, there are regulations that for a river that is more than 10 meters wide, you are not supposed to build anything on the radius of 30 meters or so. And yet, they got the permit to build on that riverbank. Money talked, I guess, but at what cost? The residents now, they pay the cost, both in material, also in their health too. And that is the reality. So at present, the building industry, they emit 40% of annual global CO2 emissions, and half of which are for operations. And also they consume they created 2 billion tons of waste every year. And this is a hard topic to swallow, because humans, without exception, we need a roof over our heads, all of us. But how to achieve that without jeopardizing the environment? Now, let's see if our ancestors may have the answer for this. Okay. So one of the ways to do it is through something called vernacular architecture. Now, some of us here are not architects, me included actually. So let us give a brief summary of what it is. Now, vernacular architecture is something that is built by people who lived in the community or society to meet their specific needs, be it the local techniques, local materials, climate conditions, and also something to reflect the local tradition. And there are 4 elements for something to be called a vernacular architecture. First is that it has to accurately respond to the climate condition, and then it had to respond to the needs of the community. And then it has to be a cultural reflection of the nature of the community, and then it has to use the local material and techniques. Right, so a vernacular architecture is something that is used by society all around the world. So what makes ours in Southeast Asia different? Well, we have our similarities and also our differences. Now, for instance, since we share the same climate of the tropics, we have high humidity and also quite intense sunlight. So a lot of our homes, we have frame boundary, kind of like a gates or fences, but made by the nature, like trees and vegetations that serve not only as kind of like fences, but also to give us shade and to make things more fresh. And our houses also tend to have more raised platform to give better air circulation and to make use of the space below. And all our houses also have lots of verandas and balconies and shaded spaces to relax from the sun and also to gather with the family. So there is a communal function to it. Okay, and now, not less important than the physical similarities, we also have similarities in values. So, as you can see here, our traditional houses, although they only use local materials and maybe natural materials, their lifespan and durability can be compared with modern buildings. Like for example, here in the photo, Htet Pidok Library, an ancient Buddhism library in Laos, it is said to be around 400 years old, give or take. And also modern construction tend to create a lot of million tons of wastes. The local products, local constructions, they have the property of decay, and they can be turned into natural fertilizer and reuse and repurpose once at the time of needs. So think local, bit local, and zero waste. And also construction of modern house is not just about the physical, but also about the intangible. So for older people to pass down the techniques, to build the houses together, the community spirit, and all of this relaying from one generation to the other, as you can see in the picture of them building a house together in Lake Myanmar. So it has that kind of intangible spirit to it. Right. And as I mentioned earlier about the part with climate, you can see here traditional houses tend to be built with air circulation in mind to adapt to our climate here. And also, since Southeast Asia we are also vulnerable to several disasters from earthquakes to floods and to volcano eruptions, then our traditional houses also in different places we incorporate different way of survival, either from elevated floors to anticipate flood and that sort of thing. Right. So well, these values can be our ammunition to try and tackle the problems presented at the beginning. But how can we do it? First is by reflecting to what our ancestors did. And an example of this is done by a community called Shan people of Myanmar, which I will show you after this. Okay, so for Shan people, here we can see the process, how they make the house. First is they start with a ritual to ask for permission from the spirit of the land. This is showcasing the intangible culture, and then they also build it together as a community. So it's not a personal project, but a community project with the local neighborhoods, with the local people. It's a community participatory. And then they also use local materials to build their houses. So things that they can find nearby, they use, whether to create or to repair. So they also don't take green gas emission because they don't need to bring the wood or the bamboos from other areas because they use everything around them. Okay, so their culture of value, they respect the nature and they make healthy living, they adapt to their surrounding, and they support their creativity and tangible culture, and they also relay the techniques to the younger generation. And most importantly, they live side by side with the nature. Okay, now let us move to the next most environmentally damaging industry. As we can see here, we have a couple of questions here. First is, how often do you change your clothes in a day? This one is maybe quite easy. But the second one, do you remember where and from whom did you get the clothes you are wearing right now? Now, if you cannot answer the second question, then it is fine, because the way, at the ease and the speed that we get our clothes today, the way the world of fashion works right now makes it indeed very difficult to see where our clothes originally from, to see the hidden cost behind money, the hidden cost of materials, or even human efforts behind of our clothes. So today we can produce clothes at a really fast pace, and consequently the consumers also consume it in a very fast pace. And so we are becoming more obsessed with running around with the newest collection, items that are fast to produce, easy to buy, and yet diminish in value and later turn into waste. And And as you can see here, approximately 100 billion garment industry around the world, they produce 9.2 million tons of textile waste every year. And the fashion industry is also the second biggest consumer of water, and is also responsible for 2 to 8% of global carbon emissions from shipping the clothes or the materials worldwide. And not only that, there's also a social impact on workers of garment industries because of the fast and lots of demands. So the workers, they often work long hours, they receive low wages, and especially if you are marginalized, and you may also face brutal practices like sexual harassment on work and also unsafe working conditions, especially if you are using non-organic material that might be carcinogenic. That is also one of the issues here. Right. Okay, so what are the flip side here? Now, do you know what if the clothes are made slower with more mind towards the local? Now, did you know that local textile, mostly made from natural processes, natural fibers, and maybe flexible or breathable materials, they make wearing them so comfortable that that you want to wear it again and again. And not just that. But local textiles also can be used in multiple ways, such as maybe as a shawl, or maybe as a baby carrier, and maybe as a head covering. So it's something that you can just really throw away so easily. And also some of local textiles, especially if they are produced naturally with natural ingredients, they are biodegradable and non-toxic, non-allergenic, so it's safe both for the environment and also for the people who make them. And also they also support local value and local wisdom, because clothes are made by people. People sometimes put their stories into it, either through patterns, either through styles. And clothes is without doubt one of the culture. So by making clothes by ourselves, slowly putting our identity to it, it can support the local value, it can support the local economy, it can support the local people. Okay, now we would like to share with you a personal story of someone, or maybe a group of people, who actually put all these theories to reality. And this is the Zon Pao group, for people living with disabilities from Laos. It is an organization, non-profit, run by a Lao woman with disabilities to support fellow Lao people by empowering them through peer-to-peer to build their confidence and develop handcrafting skills. And one of our friends here, Kola, she's in the one with the white shirt on the left. Yeah, she actually visited the group and shared with us their stories. And before this, I would like to invite us maybe if we can maybe rethink or change our mindset regarding disabilities, because after reading about this group, I actually found that they may be called people with disabilities, but reading their stories, listening about their efforts and their fights, I actually think that maybe they are actually mentally able. So as long as they were given the opportunities, as long as they're given the support, they can achieve anything. So what do they do in this group? They produce handicrafts and sell locally as clothes, accessories, souvenirs, and etc. And they live together in the center. And they come from different ethnic cities. So each and every one of them, they put their stories into the products they made. And so each have a different pattern, different unique style that they can also introduce the stories of their regions to the people who buy them. And then they also earn their livelihood by planting vegetation for consumption and distribution as well. And they also initiate kind of a sustainable practice to recycle single-use plastics into accessories like bags and and balls and dolls like this. Though, despite it all, it is not a smooth sail, so they also face a lot of challenges, and one of the most dire challenges is actually related to climate change. Because due to climate change, the temperature change, and these people here in Zone Pao group, they already have low immune system to begin with, and this kind of temperature change make them get sick more easily. And also on top of that, the healthcare system is not yet inclusive for them. It's quite difficult for them to get therapy or things they need to combat their condition. So what can we do to help them? What do they need for the support? Okay, first, they need the government to help support all handicraft sectors by protecting the copyright for national handicraft products. And second, they need specialists to contribute ideas, more ideas to expand more on their ideas on single-use plastic recycling. And true, and probably one of the most important, they require free medical health care or at least special offer for them. Right, so our messages in conclusion. So with this, we have maybe a couple messages to say to you. Now first, for fellow young people, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. For example, maybe if you have the money, if you have the asset to develop or to build a housing complex on an environmentally vulnerable area, doesn't mean you should go around with it. You should go around with it. Because you might not receive where you not be risking anything, but other people and the environment may have to pay the price one day, or even maybe the next generation may have to pay the price one day. So before acting or doing something, it is better to have the mindset on sustainability, right? And next is to disseminate knowledge, any knowledge you have about clothes, about food, about architecture, of traditional things through your peers, either through social media, through local grassroots or enterprises, that sort of thing. And also, this is a message for young architects. Before making a new design, it is better to study what local resources that we can use, what stories that we can tell, and the relation with how to adapt it with the local climate, with culture and the social demands. So think nature and social living. And last is respect to our old ancestors. We young people, we may think that maybe the ideas of our ancestors are behind the times. It is irrelevant to today, which is very different than the past. But we have seen the wisdom of our ancestors, and we have seen their connection with nature. And today, we need that connection with nature more than ever, and their wisdom may help us to re-establish that connection. Right, so a message for everyone else. So we need support for marginalized people through more adequate healthcare and exposure to their plight and support for what they are trying to do. And we also need to push more for maybe training or management for people grassroots who are trying to do the right thing when they are small and have less resources. We can help support them. And then we also need a policy to help encourage traditional constructions, especially one that lives side by side with nature and not destroy it. Okay, so now we know that our traditional culture is not only good or sustainable towards nature and the environment, but also for us humans, for our wellness and for our health too, because they reflect ethics, wellness, and empowerment. And to achieve sustainability, we need to support, we need to encourage, we need to raise awareness about all this, and not just for us, but also for people across generation, for public-private enterprises, for the government. We all must work together to create a sustainable way of living. Okay, thank you for listening, and I would also like to thank my wonderful group mates, for Alfred, who made all the graphics, and the slides, and Smey for the insight on architecture. We are all newbies here, and Kola for visiting the Zonpao group and shared with us their stories, and also for SEACHA and the Science Society for giving us this opportunity, this platform, and for our advisors who took us where we are today, and for everyone who's sitting here, and everyone on Facebook Live or on Zoom. Thank you for listening.
Indeed, that was a wonderful presentation, but we also have to thank you guys, Vidya and the teammates, for giving us such information. They've shown us that the built environment currently and the fast fashion has damaging impacts to our environment. And because of the greenhouse gases, the waste it is emitting right now at this moment, they've presented us with solutions in terms of the traditional culture and values that could be used to our advantages. For example, the vernacular culture, the Shan construction, or in terms of the wearing local production values, as well as the people with disabilities that was able to live sustainably. And they've shown us that traditional culture and values does not have to be linked to environment only, but it also has to involve social empowerment, which in this case is the people with disabilities. In the end, we all need all stakeholders' support, the government, the private, and the civil society to collaborate in order for us to bring these solutions, our ancestors' traditional cultures and values and good practices, and for us to bring it to the 21st century in order for us to live sustainably and let the people's lives be reflected with ethics, wellness, and also empowerment. And without further ado, I would like to pass this mic on to Elliot for our second session.
Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you, speakers from Group 1. Thank you, Widya, for that presentation. I would now like to invite Group 2 up to the stage. We'll have our joint Q&A and discussion session for Groups 1 and 2 after the Group 2's presentation. But I'd like to now announce the speakers for Group 2, Mr. Chung Yen Zun, Ms. Teptuangcham Buntideth, and Mr. Paulo Andrusi Hasagawa. Thank you so much, and please make your way to the stage. Please join me in welcoming our speakers. And now I'll hand it back over to our wonderful moderators. Thank you.
So as Elliot mentioned, as we're getting set up here, we're going to combine the questions for Group 1 and Group 2 at the end. So if you have questions for Group 1, hang on to them. And I'm sure you'll have questions for Group 2 after you see their wonderful presentation as well. So over to you, Andy.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon to the different delegates from different countries. We are here to talk about a topic under sustainable production, and specifically seaweed production in Southeast Asia. So what's the problem in sustainable production, not just in Southeast Asia, but probably internationally? Every year, about 8 million tons of plastic products make their way into the ocean, and that makes up our plastic pollution into the ocean and from our waterways. These plastics take about 800 years to degrade and turn into microplastics, and this small microplastics then slowly finds its way into the food chain and ends up in our plate. We ingest about 5 kilograms of plastics we eat every week from plastic pollution. Another problem we have is emission from agricultural input. We are polluting our waterways. We are also slowly depleting our waterways, not just by overfishing, but also through the overproduction of our agricultural system. This emphasis on yield has called on an imbalance in the nutrient system of the water column through an overloading of nitrogen and phosphorus. This loading of nutrients in the water the water column not only causes algae blooms that suffocates life underwater, but also releases nitrous oxide into the atmosphere, which has a carbon dioxide equal of about 250 times. Another problem in sustainable production would be eutrophication. We might think the world's biggest polluters would come from heavy industries and such, but the truth be told that the food that we eat in our plate is responsible to 25% of the world's GHG emissions. So sustainability in production and climate change, we should focus on nature-based solution to mitigate climate change and support ecosystems. With that, let me introduce you to the current situation and the cultural background of seaweed production in the ASEAN region. In the Philippines, what is considered as the most concentrated species of seaweed production would be from Euchuma, species as found on the southern islands of the Philippines, which is the Mindanao and Sulu area, as you can see in the map. Meanwhile, in Thailand, species of Gracilaria and Porphyra are abundant in Thailand, and they are used to extract for animal feed, for food, in extracting agar, and for medicine. On the other hand, Vietnam, history of seaweed production coming back from the 10th to 13th century, which is most commonly used for Oriental medicine. And its diversity comes from the south-central Vietnam region. Species like, again, Euchuma and Capapicus is abundant. Cambodia, on the other hand, again, Euchuma is another commonly used species of seaweed in the area, while Capapicus seaweed was selected as the main species of cultivation. In Indonesia, Euchuma is considered as the most common, used for food extraction, export of agar, and earliest records of seaweed production can be traced for more than a century. And Myanmar, in the Rakhine and Tanintari coastal regions, include the most diverse species. And we have a couple of species here like Chlorophyta, Phaeophyta, and Rhodophyta species of seaweed. And in Malaysia, in the eastern coast of Sabah, is considered as the most suitable for seaweed production. Fishing communities in aquaculture, including seaweed cultivation in Sabah. Again, Euchuma is considered as the most common of these species. And speaking of this region, we will now be focusing on a community that harvests this type of seaweed production, and that would be the Bajau, Semporna Bajau people. So the Bajau people are indigenous ethnic groups that live in the west coast of the Sabah region and even on the southern coast of the Philippine Islands. They have retained their seaborne lifestyle. They are boat dwellers in the area called the Coral Triangle, which consists of the southern part of the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So the Bajau people are the second largest ethnic group in the Malaysian state of Sabah, and the ocean is everything to the Bajau people. It's their home and playground for their children and the main source of food and income. To give you another insight on its relation to another country, which is Philippines, we have the Bajau Samal people in the Mindanao and Sulu area, and they commonly reside in the areas of southern Mindanao, southern Palawan, and Basilan, Davao, and Zamboanga. So their common means of livelihood would be the typical sea dwellers for fishing, farming, logging, hunting, boat building, pearl diving, mat weaving, pottery. And they use boat houses for dwelling, for a more efficient lifestyle close to their livelihood, which again goes back to our focus on seaweed production. So as you can see here, there are pictures of the Samal Bajau people, and they are regarded as among Sabah's key commodities, and you can see seaweed is being harvested. The calm waters of the sea surrounding the islands of Sabah are among the factors that render this area conducive to seaweed culture, where various species of algae are cultivated and harvested for use in the pharmaceutical, cosmetic, and food industries. So, what innovations and community development should be are made in terms of seaweed production? So this is from grave to source, or rethinking of the flow of material and emphasizing the end of life cycle of the seaweed production, and how to engage stakeholders, understanding their limitations, distributing resources, and the ownership of this type of system or production. So as presented here is a sample of how the cycle of production of seaweed comes from how it is harvested from the raw material, turned into, as you can see in the diagram, fertilizer, then as a farming tool, then tracing its elements back to the sea. So it has this end of life cycle system, and it could be used as seaweed powder for pharmaceutical and cosmetic purposes, or even in this example, bioplastics, then back to carbon, then back to the sea. So it's a functioning in the ecosystem and designing products based on natural function in ecosystem. Here are other examples of how that raw material of seaweed can return back to its natural stage. We have AG inputs as an example here, where triple action, water retention, natural and bioavailable trace elements, and the reduction of nitrous oxide emissions. And products such as biomaterials, which degrades naturally, keeping the single use single, and reducing microplastics from leaching. So what do we expect from our coastal communities? So that would be creating a fair and societal standing, to have them access to equal finance, and for them to access fair pay for what they are doing, for what they work with. And that ends our presentation for seaweed production. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think we all wonder who you guys are, these young people. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Paulo Andrew Hasegawa from the Philippines. I am an architect, a lecturer on architecture history, and an advocate on heritage architecture.
My name is Thep Dongchan Buntidet or Kun Sing. At the moment, I am people and culture consultant and also candidate PhD Resources Management and Development from Lao PDR.
Afternoon everyone, I'm Chong from Malaysia. So I've personally been working on this seaweed project for the past 4 years. So the whole idea of ag inputs and bioplastics from seaweed, I'm currently working on that personally. So that is what the presentation is based off of. Yeah.
Just to wrap up, what I see similar with the recent presentation, the presentation before, Vidya mentioned that in Southeast Asia, we have commonalities. In her presentation, she mentioned the term of vernacular design and also other construction methods that us Southeast Asian regions have in common. And I also see it in this case as well. In this case, it's seaweed production. And I think that these traditional cultures of seaweed production can be improved as we can see from the presentation, into a BCG model, where these bio-circular and green economy could be in 21st century using these traditional cultures. Because in this case, we've seen that they're using renewable biological resources, in this case seaweed, and produce value-added products, which is fertilizers and also bioplastics. I think because of our commonality in terms of the resources, we can together collaborate and further improve and kind of give value to these products in the near future. And to end this is that in order for us to improve our economy, BCG model emphasizes on the environment, where it has to be a circular flow of these resources where these groups mentioned, and also a consideration of the indigenous ethnic groups, because we need to take in account of their viewpoints in order and view them as stakeholders into engaging with seaweed production. And with that said, I would like to move on to our Q&A session.
Group 1, can you come up and sit in the front so that we can have Q&A and you're here for everyone to see?
Thank you. So as my colleague and I would begin setting up chairs on the main stage, we're going to ask the speakers to transition so that they can all be facing you. As we get ready, please consider questions that you have, both for groups 1 and group 2. And if you start raising your hands, we can start going around with microphones to identify speakers.
The moderators would like to ask a couple of questions before we get to the audience, if that's okay.
In that case, please do hold your questions and we will get to you soon. Okay. Thank you. If you could also join me in another round of applause for Group 2's presentation, I'd like to. As Gretchen spoke about a little at the beginning, these groups have been working on these research projects and their presentations since August 2022. And after a 3-week workshop, or 3-day workshop, excuse me, which was the first time of them meeting all in person, they developed these projects themselves and have been working in collaboration across at least 3 different time zones. So we're very grateful for their work on this. And now I'd like to hand it back to our moderators for the discussion and Q&A session. Thank you.
So to begin, I'm a young person and I'm very curious on how you guys engage with your community in terms of sustainable ways of living. Do you have any actions I could, as a young person, start in order to help kind of discourage climate change and also in terms of respecting my culture, traditional culture?
Anyone could answer.
Yes. All right, thank you. Okay, I will answer first. So my personal experience on sustainable actions. Okay, you mentioned community. Mine is not that big. Mine is probably the smallest community, family. So it's actually it's actually not an official culture or anything. But my mother, she started last year making something called eco-enzyme. So every time we cook or we peel fruits, we don't throw them into trash, but we keep them and then we ferment them into, and the end result is something that we can use to mop floors as a cleaning solution, cleaning agent. So starting from I think a couple months, we haven't been buying any more of that cleaning solution from the stores, but we use the one that we create our own. I remember the first time I saw my mother just doing that because it was fermented. So at first it smelled horrible. So I asked her, "Mom, what are you making?" And my mom said, "Ecoenzyme. I'm saving the earth." Like the Avengers, like that. So yeah, but yeah, it was a very small step, and it's not an official Southeast Asian culture, but I think it's a good initiative to be a culture one day. So that's from me. And next.
Okay. So yeah, the same as Vidya, my family also does a sustainable way of living. As we know, every piece of money is important for Myanmar people at the time. We get to save the foods and every items, yeah, because it is so expensive nowadays. So for example, as for my family, my aunt who cooks and prepare for me, keeps the food we left at night and place in a refrigerator, and we cook and we mix with other items to make a new dish. It's very tasty. And after that, and even we cannot eat anymore. We feed them on birds and other animals. So it's in Buddhism, it is a kind way of making goodness.
Hello. For me personally, from my experience, I would say that comparing to my style for sustainable way of living, I would choose like wearing the traditional clothes. The clothes that I'm wearing today, even this is Laos silk, Laos skirt that it's inherited from my mom. Is that in this case that it can be example to see that our clothes is very durable and it can be reused, even been worn in many times. Especially it's also the identity to preserve our culture, and it's also protecting from reuse the new resources. Yes.
And for me, it's kind of similar of India, but I would like to highlight about the food saving for my family. Actually, my mother always cooking by any pickle like vegetable like cucumber, cabbage as well. So it is the way that this sell food, and also the kind of in term we sell with the long of eating. So it is the kind of sustainable of eating, and also forwarding to the sustainable of living as well.
Hello. Let me answer the question from Grace. I think in the small ways, like refusing plastic, single-use plastic products like what we have presented earlier. Back in my country, in the Philippines, there is this culture of single-use plastics or sachet plastics. I'm not sure if it's also a thing in your countries. A lot of products sold in smaller portions are usually in encased in small plastic sachets, which after use doesn't have any value anymore and are turned into solid waste. So in simple ways, probably in what I do in my daily life, refusing plastics like that and bringing own containers, bringing own like for beverages, you bring your own tumblers, and for food, you bring your own reusable plastic or glass containers. Those ways could help a lot in turning that plastic-centered culture to a more sustainable one.
Just the last one. In terms of engaging communities, I'm not talking about a personal level. My opinion is that every single ethnic community or has their own cultural wisdom. The problem with what I see from more like scaling it is that a lot of times the communities themselves don't know their value, right? So it's not, for me, I think that it's not really for us to tell people what to do or live a certain lifestyle or cultivation method. For me, is to identify what are the problems already existing in the market. So it could be sustainability problems, plastic pollution, water pollution, air pollution, and then looking at the cultural knowledge or wisdom within the community, and then providing a value for them. That way they are not left out of the conversation, because a lot of times when we say we want to do something for the community, it's very localized. There's no 10 years down the road, is it scalable? Or is it just scalable within this 50 acres? So for me, I think it's a lot of times it's about identifying value. For example, the first panel was talking about peat soil and how the orang asli are being pushed out of their land to plant palm oil. But even with the weaving methods, there are certain crops that you don't have to drain the peat land to produce raw material for, let's say, baskets and other apparel products. So that is a value that maybe the orang asli has not really tapped into and put it out in the market yet. Or it could be something pretty simple as trying to, for like natural pigments, a lot of times it's not that, the idea to use only natural pigments is great, but how do we kind of bring that value further up? What kind of certification schemes can we offer to local communities to sell their pigments, not just to their own weaving guys to sell at the art market, but how do we scale this up so that brands like Gucci or Louis Vuitton that has that kind of, the clientele has that kind of purchasing power to buy that pigment, that shirt that's dyed with that certain pigment. So a lot of times it's just very simple stuff by us being more urban dwelling on how to identify value in each set of community. Yeah, that's my personal opinion.
Thank you so much. So to young people out there, the panelists have said that just small actions that have been passed on from generations to generations, whether it's dressing or using waste that could, mop the floor, that it is these small actions that we have to preserve and protect in order for us to live sustainably in this world. But there are also some lifestyle that are harmful, but it sticks to our culture. For example, using disposable bags or single-use plastics. And those we have to, as young people, we have to always think about the environment. So whenever we engage, we go outside or in our daily lives, we would consider reducing the waste. And also one last point is that not only we could engage in sustainable lifestyle, but he pointed out that for us ourselves, we could be the ones who create projects and engage with these communities by going local and use our creativity to find the value in these local culture and products that is happening right outside our neighborhoods. So the next question, I'm curious about the seaweed production these ethnic groups have been doing as of this moment and for the past. What vision do you guys have for the future in order to improve the seaweed production in Southeast Asia?
For me, the seaweed project is kind of interesting with the current trend. You see, when the Russian and Ukrainian war happened, the first thing to go up in price, you notice, is energy prices, right? So oil, gas, everything went up. Then the second thing that went up in price is fertilizer. So fertilizer, you need energy to transport. Then you also need energy to create. So the idea is that with seaweed, you're able to kind of use the natural function of the raw material source and turn any coastline into a kind of like a localized fertilizer mine, because there's only about 3 geolocations whereby fertilizer is actually extracted from. So it is something that is quite interesting because as we try to move away from the fossil fuel industry, you have to move towards a bio industry. So when you move towards a bio industry, there is this big dilemma whether you take this 10 acres to plant it for food, for human consumption, to increase food security, or are you going to use these 10 acres of land to plant raw material for bioplastics, for biofuel, which is not contributing to food security. But transitioning towards aquatic plant-based or sea plant-based raw material, you completely disregard this dilemma because you're no longer using arable land for cultivation, you're no longer using fresh water for irrigation, and you're recycling leach nutrients in the water column. So that is one of the things that we see, hopefully with policy changes, this and that will help push this trend that makes seaweed farming more like it's no longer a niche industry, but it becomes more of a biorefinery model, similar to that of the oil and gas sector.
As Jun has mentioned earlier, that is will be come up after we have an vision and mission turn to be an objective. But my personally and our group, firstly, we would like to use this opportunity to be influencer, to inform about how we can be awareness of the mindset of sustainability, especially turning the local entrepreneurship to the international entrepreneurship and worldwide onward. Secondly, we are well based on the sustainability implementations, such as first one, it should be environment. Second one, it make the profit for the community. And the last one is make the society have the corporations. And the last one, we would like to implement the product to be consumed in-house, not just only to be a customer to consume with another product that we have to pay more expensive on. Yep. Thank you.
So to make this seaweed production happen, I think what they've mentioned is a lot of like macro scale changes that happen in the policy level. So I think that in order even though us young people really want to contribute in this field, another sector that we really want to motivate are the policymakers for us to kind of expand the seaweed production that won't harm the environment and also expand the awareness of people in the public as well. Now moving on to the next question, as a young person, not like an expertise, young people like you guys, I wonder what circular economy in terms of like the seaweed production is, like how does the process or it works?
Sorry, it works. A lot of times when we see like a very nice sports car, right, you see the aerodynamics, this and that, and then they kind of say, oh, it's biomimicry, we're learning it from a hummingbird or this and that. So our opinion is that when we are trying to solve such a huge issue similar to like climate change and global warming, the answer should be reliant on biomimicry, but not just on very specific kind of niche functionality. The problem and the solution should be looked at systemically. So meaning to say that you can't just choose one characteristic of the raw material. You must look at the raw material as a whole within the ecosystem. So for example, if we're talking about, if we go out of seaweed and try to change the conversation, is that if we're talking about peat soil cultivation, right? The problem with peat soil cultivation is the releasing of trapped carbon dioxide within the peat layer, because you have to drain out the moisture from the peat soil for you to be able to cultivate anything be it oil palm. You see that happening in pastures in the Netherlands, whereby cows have to, the pastures have to be drained out every year, so the land is actually slowly sinking because of this drainage. So peat soil, if we were to use a systemic approach, let's say local wisdom or knowledge from the Orang Asli people, we could just not think about oil palm planting. We could think about with the, sorry if I butcher this, with the pandanus plant that they are using it to do mat weaving. Why not just use something that is already within that ecosystem instead of changing the ecosystem? Use back the ecosystem, empower the local people. That way it's way harder for you to kick out a millionaire out of 10 acres, then it's easier to kick out a guy that's earning 1,000 or 5,000 bahts a month than you kicking out a guy that's earning a million a month. So when you empower the local community through their knowledge and wisdom, you're not only solving the climate change issue, but you're also kind of bringing up the social standing. You don't have to worry about whether my community is quiet or silent or non-confrontational when my community is affluent. I have money, so you can't buy me out, right? I can lawyer up. I can quantify the value of my land every year, every month. I'm harvesting 10 tons. If you're buying me out, I want reimbursement. Whether that is something that developers, plantation owners, miners would want to reimburse, then that's up to the community to see whether that's a fair deal for them. So I think it has to be a systemic approach. So for seaweed, it's also the same. For peat soil cultivation, it's also the same. Look at the raw material and its function in the ecosystem. Rather than changing the ecosystem, use the ecosystem itself. Yeah.
Hello. I agree with a lot of with most of the points Zun said, and yeah, to further reinforce what he said, a lot of materials that have this cycle that is more sustainable in production are vernacular materials or indigenous materials, and a lot of those materials are processed by communities that needs help, and by, yeah, again, like what Zun said, the use of these materials empowers them, not just culturally, but probably economically in the future. That's all.
To overview lappings from my colleagues, talking about the sustainability productions, we have to looking back on the overall process of the improvement to make to the final products, because sometimes, most of the time, when it is beginning, it's starting with the cultural wisdom to the natural products. And by the end of the day, it's changing to be and commerce, as Kola mentions about the textile. In the beginning, it's made from natural, and after that, it's turned to be commerce and chemical it take inside. So sustainability productions on seaweed. Firstly, we're looking back on the input for the process. Is it the seaweed produced or pan, really sustainability, or any chemical to adding on? Secondly, on the label, is the people in the community, they get fair payment. They access the financing to produce this. Second one will be talking about the process. If the process is affecting and turning to the waste into the environment, turning to air pollution, turning something to the sea, to the water, or to the land. And last as not least, the products, output the product, where is it go on the end of the day? Go to the landfill, go to the sea, or go to microplastic in our stomach.
Thank you so much, the panelists. The questions from our moderators have ended. After lunch, I see you guys' eyes drooping already, so maybe you guys are tired from my voice, but now it's time for you guys to ask any questions if you guys have any. Now's the time. This gentleman, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I want to ask a question for Group 1. I don't know if I speak for other parts of Southeast Asia, but back home in my country, I'm from Java, Indonesia, building a traditional house is ironically more expensive than building a regular concrete house that we see every day in Indonesia right now. Because the materials, the woods are now more expensive than the concrete materials we see in any other material stores. And usually the traditional houses, for example, Joglo in Java, takes a lot of land to build on, rather than the nowadays regular concrete houses. So seeing that the price of land has also grown ever exponentially, up to the point that my generation have started to understand or realize that we might not even have a house at all. So it goes somewhat paradoxically with the the purpose of this campaign. So how do you address that economic condition? Thank you.
Do you want to specify any any young person here, or anyone is fine? Okay, Eddie.
Okay, I'm not from Group 1, but I'm an architect. I may be able to answer. In our case, in the Philippines, yeah, it's true that wood sometimes, most of the time, is very much expensive than the regular concrete construction. In how we try to put in sustainability with the context of history and heritage into new buildings is to allow them to adapt not the original style, or probably not just the original style or method of construction, but probably the different context or the different, I'm trying to find a good word for it, attitudes in how our ancestors were planning those structures and adapt them into modern structures. I'm just gonna state an example. We have this concept in the Philippines of having big windows. With our ancestral houses in the Philippines, have very big windows to allow more air and circulation inside the house, thus reducing the use of mechanical equipment in cooling the interiors. So that those concepts, we inherited them from our ancestors, could be brought back to modern type of architectural design. We may not be using the same we may not be using the same kind of material like what they did from the past, because they might be more expensive, but the context or the attitudes on how they planned their buildings, like we have a term for that, passive cooling. The passive cooling can still be adapted, and it's a really interesting method of cooling, because when the Americans came to the Philippines, they introduced a lot of equipment, especially air conditioning, to the country, which made our houses, which made our buildings very much enclosed. The windows and the doors, all the fenestrations have begun getting smaller, because the smaller the openings are, the better you could cool it with air conditioning. But when we trace back our heritage from having those big windows in the past, maybe we could bring back natural cooling and passive cooling. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Also, I will also add some advices to your question. Yeah, but I think the experience between living in a concrete building and living in the vernacular, like something built with bamboo or wood, is really quite different. Yeah. So yeah, really quite different, because so different. Yeah. Well, as for me, I don't want to live in a concrete jungle, but unfortunately, I live in a city of Yangon, which is a really a concrete jungle, and also the other city in South Asia. And also that, like Andy mentioned before, we just follow the techniques and idea inspiration of our ancestor, not the exotic. So, in the place of the expensive wooden materials and that product, we can change the similar products like sustainable wood or many other items, because we are there now. We are in industrial age, and we are in and which is very innovative. We can innovate it. We can innovate, and we can invent in many other sustainable materials. So, and also like the bamboos and many other things, they are really fast and grow than any other plants. Yeah. So we can change. We can replace the materials and products, and also as there are many concretes and bridge building in my city, in Yangon, there's a few amounts of wooden buildings in my city. So maybe 15 or 20 years from today, wooden houses will be the precious than the concrete buildings. It can be the more previous and maybe describes as a living heritage. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Is there any other? Okay, go ahead, sir.
I want to thank the Filipino gentleman for his observations. I'm from the United States. Sorry about all that air conditioning. Now, my real question is this. Your problem is not scientific. Your problem is political. And what are all of you doing within your political context, your cities or your countries, to get the power brokers to buy your story, to go along with what you're prescribing for the future? What are you doing to convince the people that count?
I think I can answer that when it's a kind of weird. There's this, especially for developing countries, I'm pretty sure that you guys are quite aware of, is that there's this idolization of the West, right? So in my opinion is that sometimes when we approach as a local company or as a local individual, when we approach the government immediately, they might not be that receptive, right? Because it's just something that we're doing locally. It's not, I don't have a card, there's nothing good for me. But this whole idea of sustainability is a very new thing. It's kind of Western driven. The narrative and the targets are all set in the West, like it or not. So for me, what I see works the best is that if you kind of leverage either a Western face, or you leverage a Western company, or you're saying that this is something that the West is interested in, that would kind of tingle their senses and maybe like, might be worth something to look at. But I think overall it's a bit hard to kind of, politicians are politicians, so it's a bit hard to kind of convince anything unless there is a multilateral kind of approach whereby you have foreign countries coming in. Then it's a matter of saving face, because in the end it's also politicians being politicians. So yeah, you have to kind of make them feel good about themselves, at least in what they're doing, and then they probably get something going a bit. Not to say it will go, but at least they'll, in Malay we say layan you. Yeah, we're working very closely with multinational companies and also with research organizations, because sometimes with all these cultural stuff or sustainable stuff, is that there is a lack, not to say, it is a scientific issue, there's a lack of scientific data because you can always tell a nice story, but in the end, how much carbon you're saving, when the government asks you back, okay, how much carbon you're saving, I have this tender for concrete, right? And it's all 10 times or half the price of your bamboo or teak or whatever hardwood. So if we were to kind of counter-argue, you will need a lot of data to back that. So we're working also with research institutes to actually identify, okay, how much carbon or how much fertilizer saving we are getting out of using our fertilizer, how well this actually have it here, how well does this bioplastic degrade in ambient temperature against conventional plastics. So a lot of homework has to be done on the technical side, and then also there's this whole politics game where you have to kind of give them face and make them feel good about themselves. Yeah.
Are there any other comments, or it's all right? Go ahead.
Maybe I have some comment related with the political development in my country. Actually, if we back into the past, I feel like I'm still curious and ask myself that if we back into the past after we got independent from French protectorate and during in 1960, we feel like the government mostly they approach for the public the public working and communicate related with the building to build with the education building, the hospital, and also the kind out with and kind out with the public building. It is the way that we have the chance to create the new capital city in 1960 by legendary of new Khmer architecture One Molivan, and actually the results still passed down until we can see for the next generation. So with my generation for to take a look back to the past. But if we back to see the recently, we feel like most of the building relate with the public working and also with the construction, mostly for working with the private sector investment, and all the quality to construct and identify of the nation, they are lacking because of the, as Windia said, it is the money talking by the powerful person in the government. So actually, some old building and also with the historical side, they are becoming out the private sector belonging. So if we see the redeveloping, it start to take a look about the condition of the building. If they didn't take care too much, the solution is demolish and start with the new construction. That it is the problem Cambodia to take care and really want to have a vision to the next generation to take care about the old building with the historical building for the next generation. Yep.
Thank you. Is there any other question? This madam, please.
Yeah. We have a question for group 1. Like in the clothing segment, you mentioned promoting local production for clothing, but and providing substitutes such as like natural production. But how would you say we can change the culture or the wisdom of the modern consumer to actually adopt that type of clothing?
Yeah, I would like to answer about this question. For the example from the case study from the Sonpao group, the way of solution to answer this is they bringing the traditional clothes to redesign into the fashionable style, which is can access to many generations. So you can wearing in every occasions, and all generation can re-wearing it. And it is not out of fashion at all, because you can even use in the daily life and also preserve the culture in the same time. And it is also moving with the fashion trending style as well.
On this point, I also would like to add on for the local textiles. I will give the case of Nanyang village in Luang Prabang, where they have an textiles. As Kola mentioned, that textiles have to go with the fashion labels, but only the coating, I think that one is not enough, because for the coating we can buy it everywhere on the halls, on online, or any in the market. What it should become to make it more sustainable, we should go with something more touchable. Example, for the local community, it can be improvements for tourism side to go along with the textile or not. That is firstly. Secondly, we should give a knowledge and awareness for all consumers. What is the difference between local textile from natural and also from the chemical textile? With this knowledge, I'm sure we will look more back where our cotton, where our textile is come from. As Aliyah is mentioned earlier, some cotton is produced from very far from here, which is the producers receive very less cost. They don't have an education to develop themselves. They just produce the cotton and then send to fashionable market to produce it. Thank you.
I think you can't really solve the problem as a whole, because it's the consumer pattern of the market has really changed, right? Like Chinese New Year, last time, probably not my generation, Chinese New Year, you buy clothes once a year for Chinese New Year. But now everyone just buys clothes whenever they feel like it, right? This Shopee, Lazada, whatever, you can just buy anything without thinking. So the idea, fashion will always it's going to be faster and faster with economic development. So trying to kind of pull back consumers from buying more is not going to be a solution, because we are slowly seeing that with urbanization, consumerism, this wave is not really going to stop, right? The t-shirt you're wearing probably isn't even a year old, right? Or less than a year old. So the thing is that how do we adapt to the market? Try not to change the market, because changing the market is too big of a project. So you have movements whereby, for example, under President Emmanuel Macron in France, they did something called the Fashion Pact. So majority of the more well-known fashion labels have pledged to be more sustainable by 2030. So you do see, because we previously also worked with the textile mill before on seaweed innovation, you do see that in order for textile mills to secure supply contract, some of them have to submit Thailand should also have quite a strong textile milling industry, right, in Vietnam also. So every year you have to submit maybe 2 sustainable innovation to the fashion labels. Whether they want to adopt it is up to them, but you do see that movement going. So the solution is to start at the raw material. So how do we produce a material that is able to go in line with this fast fashion? So either it's 100% recyclable, or it just degrades maybe after 1 year, 2 years. I brought a seaweed leather clutch the last trip I was here. I wanted to bring it this time round, but it's already beginning to decay. It has fungus on it. So it's that kind of, you have to think about how the product works, how the product life cycle is, and design the raw material accordingly. Not because right now the problem is that you have nylon cotton blend that is not recyclable. So how do we make sure that everything goes in line with what is being consumed? Yeah.
So sorry, with the minute time, we only offer you, there's only one time, like one question for yours. Couldn't you please?
Outstanding presentations from both of you. My question is for Group 1, and that is on the Son Pao project. That's one village among presumably thousands in your country. And how can you identify the factors that made this village become a sustainable village, and therefore find a way to make this kind of village replicable across first 10 and then 100 and eventually thousands of other villages in Laos, so that it has a meaningful impact at a national level?
Okay, so thank you for your question. From the experience that I have involved with them, from the case study, they have what the sustainable way of their production is. They bringing the plastic resource, plastic waste to turning to valuable material, and it also includes with the traditional pattern inside them, and that product can be sold locally and also external on even overseas, and this is can gain their decent income. And this production is become more famous, and then other local village has interest in the way of production, and they also be invited to teach other villages to learn how to product this kind of products to be more sustainable way. And then now it's starting to expand to another local areas in other province. Yes, so they start from themselves, and then it's getting interest for another local, and then it's starting expand now. Yes.
I'm also would like to support Kola. We are from Laos. Actually, it's to make it to be more international. Firstly, we want to speak up ourselves, and this SEACHA conference give us a really good foundations. Now you can pop up the what is Son Pao can doing. Now it means that we are successful on the beginning, because now you know Son Pao is from Laos. But from make it successful into the international, I think that we should start with the corporations, because apart from one country, we couldn't make it successful in the same time, because the productions is not just only from the resources that we grab from the local or marketing that we can implement, but also we need to be in good cooperation together, which is along with the SDG 17 to start with the cooperation with another country. That's why we are here. Thank you.
And so anyways, if there's any other questions, feel free to ask them after the session ends, because I think most of them will be here, and they will be I'm sure they'll be very welcome to answer your questions. To conclude the session, we would like to thank you, all the panelists. They've been spending months and months preparing beforehand for this event, and hearing from their experiences, their expertise, I myself and you can feel like the sense of how they want to contribute to make change in society in real time. And so on behalf of the moderators, we're very honored to be able to facilitate this session and be able to moderate for you guys to hear. And also on behalf of the team, we are deeply grateful for your kind attention today. And this concludes the session. Thank you so much.
I would like to echo that thanks to all 7 of our speakers. You've all done a wonderful job and raising issues that I think will resonate throughout the rest of the conference, and certainly with this afternoon session. Thank you as well to our 2 moderators for their hard work. This will conclude panel number 2. We will have a brief 10-minute coffee break, so please feel free to stretch your legs, and then I will call everyone back for 3 p.m. Final round of applause, please, for our panel 2 participants and their hard work.